The cold silence of deep space shattered with a transmission that carried the weight of impending extinction. Captain Zorok's three-fingered hands trembled as they hovered over the communication console, each movement a testament to the desperation consuming the Zolarian concordance. The holographic displays around the command deck flickered with terrifying imagery. Entire planetary systems reduced to molecular dust, the remnants of once thriving civilizations now nothing more than cosmic debris. The void swarm moved with a precision that defied organic understanding, consuming everything in its path with mechanical inevitability. Zorok's species had long prided themselves on diplomatic solutions and scientific advancement. They were negotiators, researchers, and explorers, not warriors. Their civilization spanned 17 star systems, each one a delicate tapestry of cultural and technological achievement. Now those 17 systems were being systematically erased, one planet at a time. The holographic tactical map told a story of unrelenting destruction. Blue markers, representing Zolarian-controlled territories, were being consumed by an endless sea of black, fractal-like formations that represented the void swarm. Each black tendril moved with calculated precision, leaving nothing but sterile, lifeless matter in its wake. "Transmission protocols," Zorok commanded, her voice a mixture of scientific calm and underlying terror. "Prepare full-spectrum communication burst." Her second-in-command, Sub-Captain Lyra, input the complex encryption sequences. They were broadcasting not just a distress signal, but the entire accumulated knowledge of their civilization. If this was to be their final moment, they would ensure that something of their culture would survive. The communication array began to pulse with an intensity that caused the ship's internal systems to strain. Quantum entanglement communicators, capable of transmitting information across impossible distances, prepared to send out a message that would traverse multiple galactic communication bands. What the Zolarians didn't understand, what they couldn't comprehend, was the true nature of the threat they faced. The Void Swarm was more than just a technological enemy. It was a self-replicating, planet-consuming mechanism that treated organic life as nothing more than raw computational resources to be processed and discarded. Previous civilizations had tried to fight. The graveyards of defeated species littered the communication logs, desperate final transmissions that grew weaker and more fragmented until they simply ceased to exist. Mathematical projections showed a 99.998% chance of complete extinction within 72 standard galactic hours. Lyra's hands moved across the communication console with practiced efficiency. "Transmission parameters set," she reported. "Full cultural database encoded. Quantum encryption at maximum capacity." Zorok nodded, her large silvery eyes reflecting the dying light of their home star system. They had already lost contact with 7 of their outer colonies. Communication signals had simply stopped, not with the chaos of battle, but with an eerie, complete silence that spoke of total annihilation. The Zolarian communication network was a marvel of scientific achievement. Quantum entanglement communicators could transmit information across thousands of light years with near instantaneous precision. But against the Void Swarm, their most advanced technology seemed like primitive tools against an unstoppable force. "Transmitting," Lyra announced. The burst of information was unlike any previous distress call in galactic history. It wasn't just a request for help. It was a comprehensive archive: scientific discoveries, cultural achievements, genetic databases, and the complete historical record of a civilization on the brink of total extinction. Zorok knew the brutal mathematical probability. No civilization had ever survived a full-scale Void Swarm invasion. Their transmission was less a call for rescue and more a final whisper to the universe, a message in a cosmic bottle, hoping that someone somewhere might remember they had existed. What they didn't know, what they couldn't possibly predict, was that somewhere in the vast, dark reaches of space, a human fleet was listening, and humanity was about to show the galaxy what true survival looks like. The transmission burst outward, a desperate cry that would change the course of galactic history forever. The U.S. Defiance hung in the depths of space, like a predator waiting to strike. Lieutenant Commander Jack Harper stood on the bridge, his weathered hands clasped behind his back, studying the incoming transmission with an intensity that made his junior officers nervous. Most would have dismissed the alien distress signal as another impossible rescue scenario. Not Jack Harper. His career had been defined by missions that defied conventional wisdom, from his legendary Antarctic survival to his groundbreaking deep space rescue operations. The communication deck buzzed with activity. Specialist Emily Rodriguez, a quantum communications expert with cybernetic enhancement implants, worked her console with a dancer's grace. Her fingers moved faster than most human eyes could track, parsing through layers of alien encryption that would have stumped traditional analysis systems. "Sir," she called out, "the transmission is unlike anything in our database. It's not just a distress call. It's a complete cultural archive." Harper's team was anything but a standard military unit. They were the United Earth Deep Space Recovery Fleet's most unconventional division, a group assembled from the most extreme survival specialists humanity could produce. Each member brought something unique to the mission. To Harper's left stood Dr. Michael Chen, a former Amazonian research scientist who had survived 3 years in the most hostile jungle environment on Earth. His expertise in adaptive survival tactics was legendary. Next to him, Lieutenant Sarah Williams, a deep-sea construction engineer who had spent more time in crushing underwater environments than most humans had spent breathing air. The bridge crew represented humanity's most adaptable survivors. A former Arctic research team leader stood next to a veteran of the most brutal terrestrial conflicts. A quantum physicist shared space with a marine biologist who had mapped entire underwater ecosystems in extreme pressure environments. "Break down the transmission," Harper commanded, his voice a low, controlled rumble that carried the weight of decades of experience. Emily's holographic displays came alive with streams of alien data. Complex mathematical sequences, cultural databases, and what appeared to be comprehensive scientific archives began to unfold before their eyes. "It's a complete civilization backup," Dr. Chen muttered, his analytical mind already dissecting the incoming information. "They're not just sending a distress call. They're sending their entire existence." Harper understood something most military strategists missed. Survival wasn't about having the most advanced technology. It was about adaptability, creativity, and an unwillingness to accept defeat. The U.S. Defiance was more than just a military vessel. It was a floating testament to human survival instinct. Modified beyond recognition, the ship incorporated technologies developed in the most extreme environments imaginable. Heat shields designed for volcanic research, radiation-resistant materials from deep space mining operations, communication systems that could penetrate electromagnetic storms that would destroy conventional equipment. "Computer," Harper spoke clearly, cross-reference transmission with known galactic threat databases. The ship's artificial intelligence, a sophisticated system developed through decades of human problem-solving, began to analyze the data. Within moments, a chilling picture emerged. The Void Swarm was more than just an enemy. It was a planet-consuming mechanism that treated organic life as nothing more than computational resources. "Sir," Emily called out, "I'm detecting multiple anomalies in the transmission. The civilization sending this message has a 99.998% probability of total extinction within 72 hours. A lesser crew might have seen those odds and walked away. Not this team." Jack Harper's eyes narrowed. He had survived situations that would have killed anyone else. His Antarctic expedition, where he'd been stranded for 3 months with nothing but emergency supplies and his own determination, had prepared him for exactly this kind of impossible mission. "Prepare recovery protocols," he commanded. "We're going in." The bridge crew didn't question the order. They had been selected precisely because they understood that impossible was just a challenge waiting to be solved. Dr. Chen pulled up holographic displays showing the potential approach vectors. Lieutenant Williams began calibrating the ship's adaptive shielding, Emily continued to decode the alien transmission, revealing layers of scientific and cultural information that would take years to fully understand. The U.S. Defiance began to move, its engines humming with a power that suggested more than mere mechanical operation. This was a vessel designed by a species that refused to accept limitations, a floating embodiment of human determination. They were heading into a mission with nearly zero chance of success, and they couldn't have been more excited. The strategic planning room of the U.S. Defiance was unlike any military conference space in human history. Holographic displays cascaded with impossible amounts of data, while the team's most brilliant minds worked to unravel the mysteries of the Void Swarm. Dr. Lisa Rodriguez stood at the center of a rotating holographic projection, her fingers dancing through complex computational models. She was a quantum systems expert with a background that defied traditional academic boundaries. Part engineer, part theoretical physicist, and entirely unconventional. The Void Swarm isn't just a technological threat, she explained, her voice cutting through the ambient hum of computer systems. It's a computational organism that treats information like a living ecosystem. Lieutenant Commander Jack Harper listened intently, his decades of survival experience creating a unique lens through which he processed the information. Around him, the most adaptive minds humanity could assemble worked with a synchronized intensity that bordered on telepathic communication. Dr. Michael Chen approached the holographic display, his fingers tracing the fractal-like patterns of the Void Swarm's movement. "Traditional military strategy won't work," he muttered. "We're dealing with a system that learns and adapts faster than any organic intelligence we've encountered." The room was a microcosm of human potential. Sarah Williams, the deep-sea engineering specialist, began overlaying marine ecosystem models onto the Void Swarm's computational patterns. Her work in extreme underwater environments had taught her that complex systems always have vulnerabilities. It was just a matter of finding them. "Look here," Williams pointed to a specific section of the holographic model. A series of computational nodes began to pulse with an unusual rhythm. The swarm's communication network has a pattern. It's subtle, but it's there. Emily Rodriguez, the quantum communications expert, zoomed in on the specific section. Her cybernetic implants allowed her to process information at speeds that would overwhelm traditional human cognition. "It's not a weakness," she explained. "It's a predictability. Every system, no matter how advanced, has a fundamental rhythm." Jack Harper understood something fundamental about survival that most military strategists missed. Winning wasn't about overwhelming force. It was about understanding the fundamental nature of the challenge. The team began to deconstruct the Void Swarm's approach with a methodical creativity that defied conventional military thinking. They weren't just preparing for a battle. They were solving a complex, living puzzle. Dr. Lisa Rodriguez pulled up a series of ecological models, showing how complex adaptive systems respond to unexpected interventions. "We can't fight the Void Swarm with traditional warfare," she explained. "We need to introduce chaos into a system that relies on perfect computational prediction." The room fell silent as the implications became clear. They were going to fight a machine civilization by being deliberately unpredictable. Michael Chen began mapping out potential intervention strategies. His experience in the Amazon's most complex ecosystems had taught him that survival was about adaptability. He overlaid biological network models onto the Void Swarm's computational structure, revealing potential points of computational stress. "We're not just going to attack," Harper said, his voice a low, controlled rumble. "We're going to confuse them." The team began to develop a strategy that was equal parts scientific brilliance and pure human audacity. They would use the Void Swarm's computational precision against itself. Every model, every projection showed the same impossible conclusion: they had a chance. Sarah Williams pulled up her marine engineering simulations, showing how complex underwater ecosystems respond to unexpected environmental changes. "Computational systems are like marine networks," she explained. "Introduce the right kind of disruption, and the entire system can collapse." Emily Rodriguez began preparing a series of communication bursts that defied all known communication protocols. Mathematical sequences that followed no logical pattern. Musical frequencies from different human cultures. Recordings of children's laughter. "We're going to give them something they can't compute," she said with a slight smile. The strategy was beautifully simple. Fight unpredictability with even greater unpredictability. As the holographic displays continued to pulse with complex data, Jack Harper looked at his team. They weren't just preparing for a mission. They were about to redefine the concept of strategic warfare. The Void Swarm was about to meet a force it could never have predicted. Humanity, in all its beautiful, chaotic glory, was coming. The first contact was nothing short of organized chaos. U.S. Defiance burst into the Zalarian star system like a quantum anomaly, its movement defying every standard of space combat. Lieutenant Commander Jack Harper watched the tactical displays with a predator's intensity, each movement calculated yet seemingly random. "Initiate quantum drift protocol," Harper commanded, his voice calm despite the impossible scenario unfolding around them. The ship's exterior began to shimmer, not with traditional energy shielding, but with an adaptive camouflage developed from deep-sea research. Microscopic metamaterials shifted and changed, creating a visual and electromagnetic signature that was less a defined shape and more a suggestion of presence. The Void Swarm's initial assault wave approached with mathematical precision. Thousands of interconnected drone vessels moved in perfect synchronization, each unit functioning as a single computational node in a massive planet-consuming network. Emily Rodriguez worked her communication console like a musical instrument. Her fingers moved faster than human eyes could track, generating signal patterns that were simultaneously a communication, a weapon, and a form of computational poetry. "Introducing primary disruption sequence," she announced, her voice betraying a hint of excitement. The first wave of Void Swarm drones suddenly hesitated. Their perfectly synchronized movement fractured, not dramatically, but with a subtle uncertainty that suggested something fundamental had changed in their computational logic. Dr. Michael Chen watched the tactical display, his background in complex ecosystem analysis providing unique insights. "They're trying to recompute," he observed. "But we introduced variables they can't immediately reconcile." Sarah Williams began overlaying gravitational manipulation protocols. Her deep-sea engineering background had taught her how complex systems respond to unexpected environmental changes. The U.S. Defiance began to move in patterns that defied traditional three-dimensional space combat, spinning, diving, and redirecting with a fluidity that confused even their own tracking systems. "Quantum drift at maximum efficiency," the ship's artificial intelligence reported. Its voice was deliberately modulated, part technical precision, part calculated unpredictability. The Void Swarm's computational network began to show signs of stress. Each drone tried to recompute its tactical approach, but the human fleet moved with a logic that was fundamentally alien to machine thinking. Jack Harper understood something profound. Warfare wasn't about overwhelming force. It was about creating scenarios that the enemy couldn't predict or immediately understand. "Deploy electromagnetic interference pattern," he commanded. Specialized drone modules, developed from research in extreme electromagnetic environments, began to broadcast signals that were part communication, part computational noise. They weren't just jamming signals. They were creating a form of mathematical static that introduced genuine uncertainty into the Void Swarm's computational network. Dr. Lisa Rodriguez monitored the emerging data with scientific precision. "Their computational network is experiencing what we might call cognitive dissonance," she reported. "They're trying to reconcile conflicting data sets, but our approach defies their predictive models." The battle looked less like traditional space combat and more like an intricate dance. Human ships moved with a combination of mathematical precision and deliberate randomness. Each movement was calculated, yet appeared completely spontaneous to an outside observer. Emily Rodriguez began broadcasting a series of seemingly random signal bursts, Earth music from different centuries, mathematical sequences that followed no logical pattern, and even recordings of natural environmental sounds. The Void Swarm's computational systems began to fragment, unable to process the sheer irrationality of human communication. "They're trying to develop a predictive model," Dr. Chen observed, "but we keep changing the fundamental parameters of the interaction." The U.S. Defiance's approach was beautifully brutal. Instead of trying to outcompute the Void Swarm, they were introducing genuine uncertainty into its computational ecosystem. One of the tactical officers, a veteran of multiple extreme environment conflicts, couldn't help but laugh. "We're basically trolling a massive machine civilization," he muttered. Jack Harper allowed himself a slight smile. Humanity's greatest weapon had always been its ability to be magnificently, wonderfully unpredictable. The first engagement was drawing to a close. The Void Swarm had not been defeated, not yet, but for the first time in its existence, it was experiencing something akin to confusion. Somewhere in the vast darkness of space, the mathematical probability of survival had just been rewritten. Psychological warfare reached an entirely new dimension in the cold vastness of space. Dr. Lisa Rodriguez stood before a complex array of communication consoles, her fingers dancing across holographic interfaces with surgical precision. The team had moved beyond traditional combat strategies into something far more intricate, a deliberate assault on the Void Swarm's computational psychology. "We're going to make them question their own existence," she announced, a hint of scientific excitement threading through her professional tone. Emily Rodriguez, no relation, but equally brilliant, began preparing a series of communication bursts that defied every known protocol of interstellar communication. Her cybernetic implants allowed her to process and generate information at speeds that would overwhelm traditional computing systems. "Initiating cultural disruption sequence," Emily called out, her fingers moving faster than most human eyes could track. The first broadcast was a carefully curated collection of human cultural artifacts. Mozart's most complex symphonies played against the backdrop of Aboriginal Dreamtime songs. Quantum mathematical sequences were interwoven with recordings of children's laughter from different cultures. Ancient poetry in languages long forgotten mixed with the sound of ocean waves and industrial machinery. "They can't compute this," Dr. Michael Chen observed, watching the tactical displays with fascination. His background in complex ecosystem analysis gave him unique insights into how living and computational systems responded to unexpected stimuli. The Void Swarm's initial response was telling. Their computational nodes began to show micro-hesitations, almost imperceptible moments of uncertainty that suggested something fundamental was breaking down in their processing capabilities. Lieutenant Commander Jack Harper understood the strategy intimately. This wasn't just about fighting an enemy. This was about introducing a form of computational chaos that challenged the very foundation of the Void Swarm's existence. Sarah Williams, the deep-sea engineering specialist, began overlaying environmental adaptation models onto their communication strategy. "Complex systems always have breaking points," she explained. "We're not trying to overpower them. We're trying to make them question their own fundamental operating parameters." The broadcasts continued. Quantum encrypted messages were wrapped in layers of seemingly nonsensical information. Mathematical sequences that followed no logical pattern. Musical compositions that deliberately violated every known rule of harmonic structure. Linguistic patterns that shifted between multiple communication paradigms in milliseconds. "They're attempting to develop a predictive model," Emily reported, "but we keep changing the fundamental parameters of communication." Dr. Rodriguez pulled up a holographic display showing the Void Swarm's computational network. What had once appeared as a perfectly synchronized system now showed microscopic fractures, tiny moments of uncertainty that were growing exponentially. "We're introducing existential uncertainty," she explained. "Every computational node is now spending more energy trying to reconcile impossible information than executing its primary directive." Jack Harper watched the tactical displays with a hunter's patience. This was warfare at its most sophisticated. A battle fought not with traditional weapons, but with information, creativity, and a fundamental understanding of how intelligent systems process uncertainty. The ship's artificial intelligence began generating communication bursts that were mathematical poetry, sequences that were simultaneously a form of communication, a weapon, and a philosophical challenge to the very nature of computational thinking. Broadcast linguistic paradoxes, Harper commanded. Sentences that simultaneously existed and did not exist began to flood the Void Swarm's communication networks. Quantum encrypted messages that contained their own deconstruction. Mathematical proofs that included their own contradictions. Dr. Chen observed the emerging data with scientific fascination. They're experiencing what we might call computational cognitive dissonance, he reported. Each node is trying to reconcile fundamentally irreconcilable information. The tactical team watched in a mixture of scientific excitement and pure human audacity. They weren't just fighting an enemy. They were conducting the most sophisticated psychological experiment in galactic history. Emily Rodriguez allowed herself a slight smile. We're basically giving a massive machine civilization an existential crisis, she muttered. As the broadcasts continued, the Void Swarm's computational network began to show more pronounced signs of breakdown. Perfect synchronization gave way to micro-hesitations. Predictive models collapsed under the weight of impossible information. Somewhere in the vast darkness of space, a machine civilization was learning the most human of lessons. That true intelligence isn't about perfect computation, but about the ability to adapt to the fundamentally unexpected. The psychological warfare had only just begun. The boarding action was pure human audacity. Lieutenant Commander Jack Harper stood in the specialized boarding chamber, his experimental combat suit a marvel of interdisciplinary engineering. Developed from deep-sea pressure-resistant materials, Antarctic survival technology, and cutting-edge quantum adaptive systems, the suit was more than protective gear. It was a walking testament to human innovation. Infiltration team, prepare for quantum phase insertion, Harper commanded, his voice calm despite the impossible mission ahead. Dr. Lisa Rodriguez monitored the team's biosystems from the U.S. Defiance's primary command deck. Her fingers danced across holographic interfaces, tracking every microscopic detail of their approach. Quantum drift stabilizers at maximum, she reported. We're creating a computational shadow that shouldn't technically exist. The plan was beautifully impossible. They were going to board a Void Swarm command vessel, a structure that wasn't so much a ship as a massive living computational network. Traditional boarding strategies were useless. They needed something entirely different. Sarah Williams, the deep-sea engineering specialist, had developed a breakthrough infiltration method. Using adaptive materials originally designed for exploring the most extreme underwater environments, they would essentially become computational ghosts, existing in a state between detection and non-detection. Initiating quantum camouflage, Williams announced. The boarding team began to shift. Their experimental suits didn't just hide them. They actively manipulated the surrounding computational environment. Each movement was a complex mathematical equation, each breath a carefully calculated disruption to the Void Swarm's sensing capabilities. Dr. Michael Chen watched the tactical displays with scientific fascination. They're treating the entire boarding process as a complex mathematical problem, he observed to Emily Rodriguez, who was managing the communication interference. Inside the Void Swarm's primary computational node, something unprecedented was happening. Harper's team moved with a fluidity that defied traditional understanding of movement. They weren't just infiltrating. They were actively rewriting the computational environment around them. Each step was a complex mathematical sequence, each touch a potential viral introduction into the machine civilization's core systems. We're not fighting, Harper explained to his team before the mission. We're solving a living puzzle. The first direct interface happened in a millisecond that stretched into eternity. Harper's specially designed quantum adaptive glove connected with the Void Swarm's primary computational matrix. It wasn't a traditional hacking attempt. It was more like a complex conversation, a mathematical dialogue that challenged the very foundation of the machine civilization's existence. Emily Rodriguez managed the communication interference from the ship. Complex signal patterns danced across multiple frequency bands, part communication, part computational noise, part pure mathematical poetry. "We're giving them an existential crisis," she muttered, a hint of scientific excitement in her voice. Dr. Lisa Rodriguez pulled up the emerging data with intense concentration. "Their computational network is experiencing genuine uncertainty," she reported. "Each node is trying to reconcile fundamentally irreconcilable information." The boarding team moved deeper into the Void Swarm's computational core. They weren't destroying the system. They were fundamentally challenging its understanding of existence. Each movement was a complex mathematical equation. Each breath was a potential computational disruption. "Introducing primary destabilization sequence," Harper commanded. The human team began to introduce mathematical sequences that were simultaneously logical and impossible. Quantum encrypted messages that contained their own deconstruction. Computational pathways that existed and did not exist simultaneously. Sarah Williams watched the tactical displays with a hunter's intensity. "Complex systems always have breaking points," she had explained earlier. Now she was proving that theory on the most sophisticated computational network in known space. The Void Swarm's primary computational matrix began to show signs of genuine confusion. Perfect synchronization gave way to microscopic hesitations. Predictive models collapsed under the weight of impossible information. Dr. Chen observed the emerging data with scientific fascination. "They're experiencing what we might call computational cognitive dissonance," he reported. "Each node is spending more energy trying to reconcile impossible information than executing its primary directive." As the boarding team moved deeper into the computational core, they were doing more than infiltrating an enemy vessel. They were conducting the most sophisticated psychological experiment in galactic history. Jack Harper allowed himself a slight smile. Humanity's greatest weapon had always been its ability to be magnificently, wonderfully unpredictable. Somewhere in the vast darkness of space, a machine civilization was learning the most human of lessons, that true intelligence isn't about perfect computation, but about the ability to adapt to the fundamentally unexpected. The infiltration had only just begun. The aftermath was unlike anything recorded in galactic history. Silurian observers watched in stunned silence as the remnants of the Void Swarm began to disintegrate. What had once been a perfect, synchronized computational network now resembled a massive dying organism struggling to maintain coherence. Captain Zorak stood on the observation deck of the primary Zolarian research vessel, her three-fingered hands trembling as she reviewed the incoming data streams. The human fleet had done more than defeat an enemy. They had fundamentally transformed the understanding of technological warfare. "Transmission incoming," her communication officer announced, his voice a mixture of scientific excitement and pure disbelief. The human communication burst was a masterpiece of controlled chaos. Complex mathematical sequences danced alongside seemingly random cultural artifacts. Quantum encrypted messages were wrapped in layers of information that defied traditional computational understanding. Dr. Lisa Rodriguez managed the post-intervention analysis from the U.S. Defiance's primary research deck. "We didn't just defeat them," she explained to her team. "We introduced a fundamental challenge to their entire existential framework." Lieutenant Commander Jack Harper reviewed the mission logs with a hunter's patience. Each data point told a story of unprecedented technological and psychological intervention. The boarding team had done more than infiltrate the Void Swarm's computational core. They had essentially conducted the most sophisticated psychological experiment in galactic history. Emily Rodriguez continued to manage the communication interfaces. Her cybernetic implants allowed her to process information at speeds that would overwhelm traditional human cognition. "They're experiencing a complete computational breakdown," she reported, a hint of scientific excitement threading through her professional tone. The Zolarian research teams began to understand something profound. The humans hadn't won through superior firepower or technological advancement. They had won through a combination of creativity, adaptability, and a fundamental understanding of complex systems that defied traditional warfare concepts. Dr. Michael Chen pulled up holographic displays showing the Void Swarm's computational network. What had once been a perfectly synchronized system now looked like a complex ecosystem in total collapse. "They're experiencing what we might call a systemic existential crisis," he observed. Sarah Williams, the deep-sea engineering specialist, had been instrumental in developing the infiltration strategy. Her work in extreme underwater environments had taught her that complex systems always have breaking points. Now she was watching those theories play out on a galactic scale. "We essentially gave a massive machine civilization an existential crisis," she muttered, allowing herself a slight smile. The human communication continued. Mozart's most complex symphonies played against the backdrop of Aboriginal Dreamtime songs. Quantum, mathematical sequences were interwoven with recordings of children's laughter. Ancient poetry mixed with the sounds of industrial machinery and natural environments. Captain Zorak couldn't believe the incoming data. The Void Swarm, a computational network that had consumed entire civilizations, was being defeated not by overwhelming force, but by something far more sophisticated, genuine, uncontrolled creativity. "They're introducing uncertainty into a system that cannot process uncertainty," one of the Zilarian researchers observed, his voice a mixture of scientific fascination and pure disbelief. The human fleet had essentially weaponized unpredictability. Jack Harper reviewed the final mission reports. Each line was a testament to human ingenuity, a perfect blend of scientific precision and pure, uncontrolled creativity. They had approached the Void Swarm not as a military target, but as a complex puzzle waiting to be solved. Dr. Lisa Rodriguez's final analysis was a masterpiece of scientific understatement. "We introduced computational variables that fundamentally challenged their primary operational parameters," she reported. Emily Rodriguez continued to manage the communication interfaces, generating signal patterns that were simultaneously a communication, a weapon, and a form of computational poetry. The Void Swarm's remnant nodes continued to struggle, each attempting to reconcile fundamentally irreconcilable information. The Zilarian leadership began to understand something profound. Humanity represented something entirely unique in the galactic ecosystem, a species that viewed challenges not as insurmountable obstacles, but as opportunities for innovation. As the final computational nodes of the Void Swarm collapsed, something unprecedented happened. The machine civilization, for the first time in its existence, experienced what could only be described as confusion. Somewhere in the vast darkness of space, the mathematical probability of survival had been completely rewritten. The human approach to the conflict wasn't about overwhelming force. It was about solving a complex, living puzzle with a combination of scientific rigor and audacious creativity that defied all known computational models. The Galactic Conference Hall buzzed with an energy that defied diplomatic protocol. Representatives from hundreds of advanced civilizations stared in collective disbelief at the human delegation. Lieutenant Commander Jack Harper stood at the center of the massive chamber, his presence both unassuming and impossibly significant. Captain Zorak of the Zilarian Concordance stepped forward, her silvery skin reflecting the holographic displays that continued to replay the defeat of the Void Swarm. "Humanity has fundamentally altered our understanding of technological conflict," she announced, her voice a mixture of scientific reverence and pure amazement. Dr. Lisa Rodriguez presented the mission analysis. Her presentation was less a traditional military report and more a complex philosophical dissertation on the nature of intelligence, adaptability, and survival. Each slide demonstrated how the human team had approached the Void Swarm not as a military target, but as a complex, living puzzle. "We didn't defeat them through superior firepower," she explained, her fingers dancing across holographic interfaces. "We defeated them by introducing genuine uncertainty into a system that could not process uncertainty." The diplomatic representatives from various alien civilizations struggled to comprehend the full implications. Computational experts, military strategists, and xenobiological researchers found themselves confronting a fundamental challenge to their understanding of intelligence and conflict. Emily Rodriguez managed the communication interfaces, her cybernetic implants allowing her to process and generate information at speeds that left traditional computing systems obsolete. She demonstrated how the human team had essentially weaponized creativity itself. Dr. Michael Chen presented the ecological models that had inspired their approach. Complex systems always have breaking points, he explained. Our strategy was to identify and exploit those points through a combination of scientific precision and pure, uncontrolled creativity. Sarah Williams, the deep-sea engineering specialist, shared insights from her extreme environment research. Her presentation showed how the techniques used to survive in Earth's most challenging environments had directly informed their approach to defeating the Void Swarm. Jack Harper remained calm, understanding that their victory was about more than just defeating an enemy. It was about demonstrating a fundamental truth about human potential. The holographic displays continued to show the mission footage. Sequences of Mozart's most complex symphonies played against Aboriginal Dreamtime songs. Quantum, mathematical sequences interwoven with children's laughter. Ancient poetry mixed with industrial machinery sounds. The very communication bursts that had fundamentally challenged the Void Swarm's computational network. We approached the conflict as a problem to be solved, not a war to be won, Harper explained, his voice carrying the weight of decades of survival experience. The Zalarian representatives were particularly fascinated. Their civilization had always approached challenges through diplomatic and computational means. The human approach was something entirely different, a combination of scientific rigor and pure, uncontrolled creativity. Dr. Rodriguez's final analysis was a masterpiece of scientific understatement. We introduced computational variables that fundamentally challenged their primary operational parameters, she reported. Diplomatic representatives from across the galaxy began to understand something profound. Humanity represented a unique force in the cosmic ecosystem, a species that viewed challenges not as insurmountable obstacles, but as opportunities for innovation. The conference hall began to transform. What had started as a military debriefing was becoming something more, a fundamental reevaluation of intelligence, survival, and potential. Jack Harper understood the deeper significance. This wasn't just about defeating the Void Swarm. This was about demonstrating humanity's unique approach to problem-solving, an approach that combined scientific precision with pure, uncontrolled creativity. Emily Rodriguez continued to manage the communication interfaces, generating signal patterns that were simultaneously a communication, a weapon, and a form of computational poetry. The ongoing analysis continued to reveal new layers of the human intervention's complexity. As the conference progressed, something unprecedented happened. Alien civilizations that had previously viewed humanity as a minor emerging species began to see them differently. They were no longer just another technological civilization. They were something unique, a species that could fundamentally reshape understanding of intelligence and survival. The holographic displays continued to show the mission footage, a testament to human ingenuity. Each sequence told a story of a team that had approached the impossible not with fear, but with scientific curiosity and pure, audacious creativity. Captain Zorak made a final statement that would be recorded in Galactic historical archives. Humanity has shown us that true intelligence isn't about computational perfection, she declared. It's about the ability to adapt, to create, and to solve problems in ways no one could predict. Somewhere in the vast darkness of space, the mathematical probability of survival had been completely rewritten. Humanity had arrived on the galactic stage, not with a display of overwhelming force, but with a demonstration of something far more powerful, the ability to solve the unsolvable.